it's Lee with Lesbian Speaking, and today I am bringing you a very special and a very serious TV commentary. Amy Bradley is Missing, out on Netflix. Now, before I go through this, I want to remind everybody that you should like and subscribe and share. Also, check out my Etsy shop, LS Online Finds. You can use the code LIVE15 to get 15% off your order. Thank you, and now let's start with the show.
My wife and I are both insurance agents with Illinois Mutual Insurance Company, and they would run contests every year. And this particular year, we were rewarded with a cruise.
We were pumped about the trip as a couple, but when we realized that they were going to actually let us bring Amy and Brad with us, we couldn't have been more thrilled.
Correct.
Imagine the excitement. Here you have this family that you get to take on this cruise for free because you wanted it work. Now, I've worked for places who've done that, and the amount of excitement people would have winning it and the amount of sadness people would have not winning it at the same time. But for the Bradley family, unfortunately, this was not the cruise of a lifetime.
The photographer said that he wanted to take a picture of Amy. And Amy was standing there. He said, okay, now her and her boyfriend, Amy laughed and she said, that's not my boyfriend, that's my baby brother.
Now, the reason why they're pointing this out is because it lets you know that the staff now knows that she is a single young woman on a cruise with her family, yet still a single young woman.
At the dinner table, the wait staff was noticeably attentive to Amy and kind of flirting a little bit, and we actually went as far as to make jokes at the table, like, hey, if anybody needs anything, just tell them Amy wants it, it'll be here right away.
So here they are on this cruise, and Amy and her brother go out and party basically all night because they get home at 3-something a.m. They sit out on the balcony, finish their drinks. He goes inside, goes to bed, and she stays out to get fresh air. Now, the next morning, her dad wakes up and sees that she's still laying out there and goes to breakfast, assuming that she's just going to sleep it off. But when they come back, she's gone. She has her shirt laying there, so it looks like she may have changed her shirt, but they don't know. And then they go and look for her on the ship. And they ask for help, and they don't immediately get help because it's at a time where they're stopping at a destination and people are debarking. So what do we got to do here?
One of my staff came to me and said, Brent, I've got some parents who are at the desk. They are concerned about their daughter. I went out to the desk and I spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Bradley. They were really, really concerned and, a bit forceful in wanting to know what we could do.
There are times where the staff of the boat speak in certain ways that make me go, what? And him saying here that they were being pretty forceful in looking for their daughter. Well, yeah, she was gone. She doesn't just disappear like this. It's clearly not a pattern of behavior for her. So they are rightfully concerned about her whereabouts. It just put me off that he was saying it this way. And then in addition, they didn't stop people from getting off the boat, and they didn't monitor the activity of people off the boat. They said, no. They said, give it a half an hour. Continue to look around the ship. Give it a half an hour, and then we'll involve security.
The stairs. We're not going to stop everybody's cruise because there was a missing girl. That's one family's unfortunate incident, but we still had 2,400 people who paid a lot of money. And as cold as that sounds, that's the reality.
And I get the reality. Business goes on, right? The show goes on. I get that. It's just the unfortunate way in which there's terminology that is brought up from these folks that make me go, did you care? Or were you just like, oh God, another pain in the ass customer? Upon searching, they didn't find her. At this point, the staff is thinking she probably just went overboard. Now, something that is important to note is when they described the search, they said that they had security searching everywhere, they had staff searching everywhere, and staff were in charge of searching their own quarters. So if staff were involved, they were just investigating themselves?
A search grid was between Curacao and Aruba. The Marines, the Venezuelan Coast Guard, the Navy, everybody was looking in that area. Because of the position of the boat, wind force, sea current, wave height, the body would have washed up. But she was nowhere to find, not even piece of clothing, nothing.
It's important to note that they know the current patterns of the waters and they know what would wash up because it happens. This is a regular occurrence where things are washed up. This is not a safe part of the world. It's a beautiful part of the world. It is not a safe part of the world, specifically if you are a young woman.
Most people have no idea when they board a cruise ship the dangers that are inherent there. But the things that have happened to me, things that have happened to Amy Bradley and her family, can happen to anyone, and they do happen all the time. My daughter died on a 3-day cruise out of Long Beach to Mexico. And after that, I began working for improved safety and security on cruise ships.
He explains to us that once you get 12 miles off of shore, that you're in open territory and it's lawless, and that the law that you have is on that ship. So if the ship doesn't want to get in any type of trouble with safety issues or having unsavory people on board or on staff, well, they're the cops that would be able to investigate and cover up.
The Bradley room had been cleaned before the FBI even was able to get on board, which was unfortunate because if there was evidence, there was no preservation of that evidence.
This doesn't make sense to me. And they don't speak specifically on this, but why was the room cleaned? Why was there not an immediate block off of the room and the family put into another room in the meantime, or just kept out of the room, and a full-on investigation would then come on board? Why wouldn't they have done this? Why were they not taking this so seriously? It just seems really weird to me that they would not have at least the common sense to close that off as a crime scene, especially if they think she fell overboard or jumped, or even somebody could have pushed her, yet they didn't preserve the scene.
When I first heard the news, it was apparently somebody fell overboard. And I'm like, oh, that's horrible. And yeah, they're searching for her. Later, by like the next day, I'm hearing that she committed suicide. Like, what?
From what I heard through the grapevine, she'd kind of bragged that she was a good swimmer. And when she saw the lights of Curacao, she was going to jump in the water and try to beat the ship ashore.
You had all these theories going around about what she could have done to herself. But there was also a very important theory that deserved a lot of attention.
I remember hearing someone say that someone could have drugged her and abducted her.
And that was the guy who was in the room right next to them. Now, he did have some interactions with Amy, as he admits, but he says that they weren't very big interactions. He saw her at the dance club, and people had made this claim that they heard loud noises, TV or music, coming from his room the same time that she disappeared. Now, it's hard to believe that as evidence because, as you may know, witnesses, as they get away from the situation, now realizing what's happened hours later and have all of this talk about what may or may not be, could be connecting dots of something that was from a different time, from a different room, from different things, that your mind just gets involved in all of this. So that is something that you take to a really small grain of salt, because if you don't have evidence, him having music on or TV on loud in his room, that doesn't say much.
I was working for a computer company in the San Francisco Bay Area. They were doing a trip for all their best salespeople on this cruise ship. My job was to edit a little highlights reel as a job. I'm thinking, yay, I'm gonna be on a boat. No, I was in a stateroom almost the entire time.
It's a good thing they had this guy here taking video of the event because he was able to capture some really important things. But also, he was somebody who did pay attention to his surroundings, so he can say, wait a minute, I saw her and I have video of her.
After I saw the picture of Amy, I sit down, I go through my box of tapes, and I start going through them. You drop it in, and you shuttle, and you scan, and you look. Nope. Take the next one. Shuttle and scan. Nope. The next one. Boom. And there's Amy. Clear as a bell. And she's dancing with Yellow.
Yellow is the basis on the band on the ship. His name, Alistair Douglas. And she was dancing with him that night. And she was seen later, after she had left the room, walking with him. They walked one way, and then he walked alone back, is what witnesses stated. But they could not prove it. Once again, they could not prove witness statements. So they had to just keep that in their back pocket. Now, Alistair is an interesting character, and we're going to hear him coming up more than you would think.
If you have any information on the whereabouts of Amy Bradley, please call the number on your screen.
The minute I saw the picture, I went like, are you kidding me? This is not right. I was there 4 months later when I saw her. I know where she is.
And this is what I know to be the first sighting that we have of Amy, where somebody saw her on TV, America's Most Wanted, and said, I've seen her. Virgin Islands, I have seen her.
I see a tattoo that looks like a Tasmanian devil. And she's just about to say something to me when the person who was on the inside comes up. I'm looking right at him. He stared at me. Doesn't say a word. And motions her away.
Now he remembered this because the way that the guy who was staring at him made him so uncomfortable. Well, what's interesting is he has also later identified him as Alistair. Now the family went back to the island to find Amy, and they have a taxi driver come up to them and tell them the story of who they believe was her.
My heart started beating, and he said she approached my taxi. She seemed like she was a little frantic. He said, I never will forget her green eyes. And he said she was wearing a white top with jeans, which is what she had on underneath that yellow shirt, and the jeans that were missing. She says, I need to use a phone. And he said, I pointed in the direction of the phones, and he said, Amy went the other way.
Amy coming up to a taxi, asking to use a phone, and the driver to say, there's one right there, and she walks the other way, tells me that she may have looked over and noticed that she was being watched or followed. And you can't just use a phone if you're captured and being held for trafficking.
And we were told in these places that they were owned and controlled by different mafia groups. A couple of them had open water access, that obviously you could come and go from and not be checked by authorities and that kind of thing. Some of those areas we were looking, there were makeshift kind of landing strips that could have been drug trafficking trade or maybe even sex trade.
When you think about it, there's so many different possibilities of how somebody could have smuggled her off the ship, especially when they're in waters that are not being monitored. They could have pushed her over and then a boat came and picked her up. That's a possibility. Now, there was one short-lived theory, and I'm glad that it was short-lived, because Amy actually was a lesbian. And her parents were not exactly excited about this and were less than supportive. But they say because they had concern for the world that her daughter was going to live in, which I can resonate with, because it was just a couple years, 4, 5, 6, 8 years earlier that I had come out to my family and received the same messaging, but it was not out of anger for having a lesbian daughter. It was out of concern for how the world was going to behave. So I don't think there was any foul play when it comes to the family.
It was a white girl and a Hispanic girl. White girl was petite, dark hair, some tattoos on her. And then one of the girls got up, went over to the bar. Should have just turned around right then and left.
I'm not a big fan of this guy. I'm not, because listen to exactly what he says.
Because that's when the other girl, she said, hey, they're holding me against my will. I need help. She says I owe them $200 and I can't get my freedom. This was my 18th year in the Navy. I've heard all kinds of stories from working girls. Singapore, Thailand. I've heard it before,
So here's a guy in the military, says that he goes all around the world and he hears it from all these women, which means that he's visiting brothels all around the world where women are most likely being trafficked to be there. And he's saying, I've heard it all, as in it could be a story. But then she tells him her name is Amy. He leaves. He leaves and doesn't tell anyone, because he shouldn't be there to begin with. So he's protecting himself. He's been to all these places where all these women were most likely being trafficked. And he's worried about his time in the military. Just let that soak in.
There was a lead that came in from a Navy serviceman, but it had come in years later after he had been on the island. He never reported it originally because he was obviously in the military and that was, frowned upon.
See, it's unacceptable. He didn't want to get in trouble, so he let these people, I'm not going to say just one person, because one person had said, hey, I need help, here's my name, but he said he'd heard it before, remember? He'd been all over the world to different brothels, and he'd heard these stories before. And he doesn't care. He's here on this show talking about how he reported it years later. He's not getting a hero award from me. No.
But then at some point, the waiter walked right up to us and looks at me and says, where's Amy? We want to take her to Carlos and Charlie's. At the time, all I knew it was a bar. That was on Aruba. When I told Amy, she went, we're not getting off the boat. No way. Later, I did notice a man a couple decks up that I caught eye contact with a couple times. I couldn't figure out what this fellow was looking at. I'm wondering if he's looking at Amy or looking at us.
The staff is paying extra attention to Amy while she's on the boat, and that's alarming. The reason why it's alarming is because, yeah, she's a young woman on a boat getting all this extra attention. I mean, here she is, green eyes, white woman in this island land where billionaires pay to spend time with women and young girls. It's concerning that the staff would have interest in her there, to the point where they had these family photos that they had taken when they got on the boat, and you can go up to the counter and you can buy these photos. And the photo taken of her was already purchased by somebody else. They don't know who. Somebody wanted her photo. The staff had eyes on her. It, to me, makes me leery. What are the staff doing and who are they involved with?
And then one day we get an email.
In 2005, there was a series of photos that the family received, allegedly from a website where people would meet for free sex or to engage with prostitutes.
Analysis was done on that photo, and it was shown that it very well could be Amy. I mean, I look at it and I say it's got the features. Definitely has the features of being her. It looks nothing like her, and it hurts me to think she's a lesbian being forced to be something completely other than herself for the benefit of others. I couldn't imagine. I could not imagine being in her shoes. The family now goes on to Dr. Phil and tells the story where someone watching it says, "Hey, I saw her. I saw her on the islands."
So I went in there, and I wasn't in there maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and all of a sudden I heard people coming in. They were talking, and I thought, men are in this restroom. There was a man over by the door talking. I can't remember everything he said, but I heard him say, "The deal's at 11 o'clock, and I'm warning you, you better be ready to go."
This woman describes an encounter where these men are controlling what she is doing in the bathroom. And she did have a conversation that found out that her name was Amy. And she thought she heard she was from West Virginia, although she is from Virginia, but she said she was speaking in a muffled voice. Maybe you didn't want to be heard. And she didn't like her asking the questions. And leaving the bathroom, the gentleman was standing at the door and in this lady's way, to where she had to be like, "Excuse me, coming through." But what bothers me is when she told her husband about this, and she was concerned, like, "Hey, there's a woman in trouble in there," and her husband guides her on the best way to handle this situation.
My husband's saying, "Well, there's nothing you can do, Judy." So we got back on the ship, and I remember we went to get something to eat. The cafeteria where we were sitting, they had windows, and I could see Barbados, and that's all I could think about was that girl.
We now have posted all over the place, and probably all over ships, I hope, because it's all over airports, the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I would suggest everybody save it in their phone in case they ever have an encounter like this that is questionable. Once you get to a safe area, call the hotline. That's what you should do. Not forget about it. Not say there's nothing you could do. Because all you can do is pick up a phone, and you do that, you've done the right thing. Ignoring it and walking away helps no one. Now, in the meantime, we hear from Amika, who is Alistair's daughter, who has concerns over his activities. She talks about that he would come home with all of these pictures of women in his bag, and just weird items and coincidences that she questioned as a child. And when she spoke to him, he just was, "Hey, I'm not going to talk about it. The FBI went through this. It was investigated. I have nothing to do with it." But it was really suspicious about the pictures. And when she pointed that out, he said, "A lot of people want to take pictures with the band." But what she describes, it was just the pictures of the women, not the band. Which makes me think, was he the one who purchased the picture on the wall?
And it was a very unexpected happening. I've concluded that the conspiracy theories about Amy Bradley are BS. I think she jumped or fell off.
This guy that worked on the cruise ship, security, where's security? That guy is security on the cruise ship. I don't like him. He gives me a bad vibe. I don't know if I believe things that he says. Maybe he's trying to cover his ass for doing things sloppy back then. Maybe he was involved, and maybe he just really doesn't know what the hell happened and he gets pissed off talking about it all the time. But why are you here on the documentary then? I don't like the guy. Don't trust him. But there is a guy that I do like a lot, and he is this guy.
I work in telecommunications. I'm a networking and telecommunications specialist. That's what I do. Now, one day, Iva tells me, hey, this guy, Anthony Willis, he had built this website. So Anthony and Iva strike up this kind of friendship. So then we start thinking, well, wait a minute. We have a website. We have string data that comes from that website. We have IP tracking on that website. Why don't we start to mine that data?
So they set up a website for the family so they can say, hey, if you're out there, Amy, here's some updates on our life, on our world, so you're not missing out. We miss you. We love you. We want you home. One of those websites. So they track the information on who is watching that website. Where are they watching that website? And you can't really get specifically who without some serious federal assistance, am I right? But they can figure out where these people are. And they find out something interesting.
And he starts sending me information, the data. I start filtering through the data. We're looking for patterns where these IP addresses come from.
What was pretty shocking to me was the amount of IPs that were coming from Bridgetown, Barbados.
It's the last sighting ever.
And this is the last information they see, is somebody in Barbados is watching that website. And not just watching that website, but on birthdays and anniversaries and Christmas, the holidays, there is a lot of traffic where somebody is sitting there looking at it 45 minutes to an hour going through these pictures. You don't do that unless you have incredible sentimental type emotions towards a website like that. If you're just doing a quick investigation, you just pull information and move on. I think she's out there. I think she was taken. She was a high candidate in that area to be taken, having green eyes, young 20s. She was fit, athletic. So many things about her would make her a perfect candidate to put on the market. And I hate saying that. But if you think like they do, who would you go after on the ship? How would you treat them? Would you party with them to get them to side with you or go somewhere with you? Trick them? Offer them something and tell them, now you have to pay me? There's so many different ways they do it. But I'm going to tell you right now, the most important message that we can get out of this show is that if you run into an interaction with somebody where you feel you have any sort of an inkling that they could be there forcefully, that they are being trafficked, call the hotline. The worst thing you could do is be wrong, which people will still be happy you called the hotline. Thank you so much for watching this very important episode, Lesbian Speaking. It was hard. It was a hard watch for me to think as a lesbian specifically, to be forced into this trade with men. It's just, it was a hard watch for me, and this was hard work to put this out today, but here we are. I'm glad I did get more information out there and get people questioning when you meet people on islands or in other countries or in Las Vegas. If something seems wrong, don't be afraid to report and be wrong yourself. I'd rather be wrong than come empty-handed. Make sure you subscribe, give a like, a little comment, little love. And I'm also on TikTok, Lesbian Speaking. You can catch me there, other content. I have an Etsy shop, LS Online Finds. You use code LIVE15, LIVE15. You can get a 15% discount. And until next time, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your support. Be safe and make sure your family and loved ones are safe as well.